Welcome back to Missing. I am Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. Really excited to bring this guest back to our listeners. This conversation is yet another powerful, heart-wrenching conversation with a man who just won't stop fighting. And he says he fights for this all in the name of love, which is absolutely one of the most commendable things that I've ever experienced. But Tim, before we get to this, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to John Palmer again. It's been a few years since we spoke with him. And of course, his wife, Katie Palmer, was hit by a pickup truck on the morning of April 21st, 2020, and she did not survive her injuries. And John is here asking for accountability from the people in charge in the county and the driver of that pickup truck. And so this is another chapter in the battle for justice for Katie Palmer.
And you mentioned Justice for Katie Palmer, and that's exactly where people can go to learn more about John's fight for justice for his wife, Katie. So all of the handles are Justice for Katie Palmer at Justice for Katie Palmer, and you can find out anything you want to know and how he is going about his method to bring all of this to some sort of conclusion for himself and his family and for the memory of his wife, Katie.
All right, be sure to check out the Justice for Katie Palmer social media pages and their website. And while you're out there, please follow Missing on social media at MissingCSM. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, John Palmer. John, how are you today?
Doing great. Tim and Lance, always great to see you guys. Very much appreciate you guys having me on again.
It's really great to have you on. And of course, when we have other guests on for, the second time or third time, we always say it's great to have them on. But in this case, especially, it's great to see you. The last time we spoke to you, it was a really emotional conversation, and we've kept in touch just periodically, reaching out, making sure that everything's going okay, and you've had some developments. But before we get into those developments, can you just tell the audience your story, maybe a quick recap on who you are and what brings you to the show?
Absolutely. My name is John Palmer, and I am here because of events that happened back in April of 2020. My wife and I, Katie Palmer, went for a morning walk at approximately 7:30 in the morning. And as we were coming back to our house, our neighbor, who was impaired, crossed over the roadway, hit us both from behind, killed Katie, seriously injured me, and was never held accountable for what he did. We've been fighting for 4 years. It was 4 years last month. Katie's killer was never brought to justice. We uncovered many misdeeds and missteps by the investigating officer, by a DPS trooper, by our district attorney, and there were a lot of relationships in there that we uncovered, and we've been fighting for justice for Katie for 4 years. And I think we finally made some headway for holding those that didn't do their job and turned a blind eye to justice accountable.
Well, that's great to hear. We do want to speak about these updates. And just curious, when you said impaired, what do you mean that the driver was impaired?
Wow, he was impaired. So the driver had alcohol in his system. He an hour after impact, so an hour after he killed my wife, hit her with his truck and hit her 70 feet out into a adjacent golf course. An hour later, he blew a .06 in a breathalyzer. So he was cognitively impaired. He was also visually impaired. He stated that he could not see. His windshield was fogged over. He stated he couldn't see when he left his driveway, and that was approximately about 0.3 of a mile. So it was about 38 seconds of driving a little over the speed limit that he drove blind. And then he was also impaired because we found out that he was on his phone. So he was distracted driving. So he was, all three. He was cognitively impaired with the alcohol, visually impaired that he couldn't see throughout his windshield, and distracted driving. So, on all three accounts, this man shouldn't have been behind the wheel. And because of his actions and his negligence, that led to Katie and I being hit, led to Katie dying, and me suffering some serious injuries as a result.
You said that they did a blood alcohol test an hour later. Why did it take an hour to get the test done?
So we were hit at approximately 7:45. The trooper was not dispatched until 7:55. He didn't show up on scene till roughly 8:15. And then 20 to 30 minutes after he was on scene is when the breathalyzer took place. So it was an hour. It was roughly 50 minutes to an hour after impact.
And you've told us this story before, but I always shake my head at that timeline. It's incredible that just right from the incident, and how long it took before a trooper could get there. What was the reason for this extended period of time?
Really, there was no reason. DPS was the last responding agency on scene. The helicopter had already landed. So the helicopter that would take Katie to a trauma center, which is the regional trauma center here in our part of Texas, had already landed, and DPS was last on scene. The trooper actually left from his house. From what I've been told, should have already been on patrol, should have been out of his house, but left from his house. I believe that he should have been here sooner. Again, the last responding agency to get here. But not only that. And we talked about this during the last podcast, was the lack of a blood test. This trooper showed up on scene and immediately commented on how the man that killed my wife was reeking of alcohol. So this man had crossed over the roadway, hit two people. So we were walking on the opposite side of the road as we should have been facing oncoming traffic. He crossed over the roadway, hit us both from behind, reeked of alcohol, blew a .06 an hour after impact. Any law enforcement officer that has been serving as long as this officer Chief Alcatib had would have to know, just from experience, that if you blow a .06 in an hour after crossing over the roadway, killing one person, seriously injuring somebody else, I believe that's probable cause for driving while impaired. Secondly, where do you think that BAC level was an hour before? Probably very close, if not over, a .08. So instead of driving him to the hospital, this officer drove him to his house, turned off his body camera, turned off the in-cabin recording device in his cruiser, and drove him home. And again, months later, we would come to find out that it very much appears that the Fosters and the Alcatibs were family friends. And we believe that this preferential treatment ultimately led to this officer deciding to not do his job and to give his family friend a ride home instead of a ride to the hospital for a blood test.
And you mentioned that the driver wasn't held accountable. Is this what you mean when you say that?
Correct. Was not. Correct. Was not held accountable. Last time we spoke, we did go over both grand juries that occurred. I believe we spoke last in November of 21, and I'm trying to remember. I believe at that point, I don't know if we had gone to the second grand jury or not. So what happened is that this case was brought before a grand jury, and it was no build. And there were multiple reasons the first time that our justice system here in Grayson County failed me, failed Katie, failed our family, and really failed this community. So a grand jury in Texas consists of 12 jurors. One juror was sick. Another juror recused himself, and that left us with 10. In order to get an indictment, you have to have 9 votes for a true bill, right? So instead of getting 9 out of 12, now we're down to 9 out of 10. When I asked the prosecutor who presented this case to the grand jury where the alternates were, he shrugged his shoulders, didn't know. Okay. The very lackadaisical approach to justice here in Grayson County. So in addition to that, not only do we not have enough jurors in order to actually have a fair shot at getting an indictment and justice for Katie, there was a report that was done by a third party. Now, DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety, which same thing as state police, never recreated the crash. Never did. So the county hired a third party to recreate the crash, and this report was very damning towards Corey Foster, right? Very damning towards him. The first grand jury was held on August 19th of 2020, and this report was finalized on the 25th. So the grand jury never saw this report by this third party. And also, phone records were not pulled, and they weren't investigated, and the findings weren't presented to the grand jury, that first time around. Fast forward 18 months later, through our civil discovery process, we find that Corey Foster had made a phone call approximately 31 seconds before calling 911. And the only plausible timeline that we could come across that made sense was that as he was driving down the road, he had his cell phone in his hand, was dialing a number that caused him to, which, I mean, again, he couldn't see the roadway in the first place, that caused drift over to the left-hand side. He hit us as he was dialing the number and hitting send, came to a rolling stop. And we know this because there were no brake marks, nor did the computer inside the truck record any kind of rapid deceleration. So he hit something, came to a rolling stop, which is not what a normal person would do. Somebody in the right state of mind, if you hit something and you couldn't see, I think you'd slam on your brakes. Well, he was impaired, didn't care, came to a rolling stop. He got out with his phone in his hand. At this point, saw me yelling for somebody to call the cops. Corey had identified me by name, and I was yelling for somebody to call the police. As I was crawling over to Katie. Corey had his phone in his hand, ended the call. 2 seconds later, dialed 911. He corroborates this when he talks to state police, and they ask him, "What did you do when you realized that you hit him?" He said, after the impact, I got out of my truck. I saw that, I had hit the Palmers, and I immediately called 911. So he didn't state that he dialed another number prior to calling 911. He stated as soon as he exited the vehicle that, he had dialed 911. We presented all this information to the district attorney's office, showing that, again, there was just another layer of the negligence committed by Corey Foster, which resulted again in the death of Katie Palmer. Presented this to him and waited, and I got a phone call the day before they were going to take this to grand jury. Got a call from Carrie Ashmore, who was a prosecutor that was in charge of presenting Katie's case to the grand jury, who failed the first time, and so he was going back to present this a second time, and caught me off guard. I got that phone call the day before at 4:30, and grand juries usually meet first thing in the morning. I asked him, should I be there? And he said no. I asked him, what was going to be presented, and he said that he would go over all this evidence with the grand jury, and if they wanted anything else, then he would present it to them. And then it was a very quick phone call. He got off very quickly, and Tim Lance, that didn't sit right. Something that seemed rushed. So I tried to contact him back at his office. He was busy, wouldn't take the call. I had his cell phone. I was texting him because I had his cell phone from when this went to the first grand jury. It was not a very good text message exchange, and I left it with him stating that unless I'm allowed to testify to this brand new grand jury, because again, it's been 18 months later, that grand jury's been recycled at least 3 times, unless I was able to testify as a witness, you were going to have all of the experts back up to testify. You were going to show them the report that you didn't show the first grand jury, and you were going to go over everything that you presented to the first grand jury with this new grand jury, and you were going to present the phone records. I'm not comfortable with you presenting our case again. I want to make sure that everything is presented to this second grand jury. Wouldn't respond back. So Katie's mom and I showed up at 7:45 in the morning. I think the grand jury meets at 8:30 or 9. Requested to speak to Brett Smith, who is a district attorney, and Carrie Ashmore. Requested 2 or 3 times. Nothing. Wouldn't come meet with us. Wouldn't acknowledge us. Then the next thing you know, Carrie Ashmore comes out and says, "Well, it's in the hands of the grand jury." And we asked him numerous times why. Why wouldn't you, allow us to testify? We questioned him, right? As anybody would, with this crazy timeline that was put out there. You calling me at 4:30, then you just running to the grand jury. You want to know what you're going to present, and that's when he looks at Katie's mom and tells her, "I'm damn good at my job. I don't have to explain myself to you." Runs back inside, comes out 30 minutes later, and says they're not going to move forward with it. You can imagine the anger that one person would have, being failed twice, being dismissed, disregarded by somebody that is supposed to promote and uphold justice in your county. And I let emotions fly and told Carrie in front of everybody there exactly how I felt. Very, very emotional. Still hold those same emotions for that man today, as well as Brett Smith. Brett and Carrie, we've been very hypercritical of, and it's very well-deserved for the past 4 years because we don't want what happened to our family to happen to another family.
I just want to go back to that moment where you get that information and you said that you just let the emotions fly. I mean, just hearing the story makes anybody upset, and anyone can understand how emotions could run hot at that moment. How long was it after you heard that information? Did you let your emotions go? Like, was it instantaneous, or was it like, did you think about it, or it's just like a snap?
No, we were at a very emotional state to begin with, waiting for this grand jury to come back. And again, the grand jury can only do their job with the information that's presented. I believe wholeheartedly that our DA's office at that point did not want to go after a conviction on Corey Foster, whether it be because there were some ties with Brett Smith and Corey Foster. We found out that Brett Smith was a family attorney for the Fosters during a DUI prior to him being in the DA's office. The fact that we were very hypercritical of the DA's office for, my gosh, the 18 months leading up to it. Very emotional. So we were on pins and needles because, again, we had false hope. And false hope is dangerous because you let yourself believe that, something is going to happen, and inevitably, you just get the same result, right? So when he came back and was very nonchalant and said that they're not going to go forward with it, I was actually outside making a phone call, and I saw him walk back into the lobby and talk to Rhonda, Katie's mom. And this is after he had told her that he was damn good at his job and didn't have to explain himself, which is exactly how a prosecutor should speak to a woman whose daughter was killed horribly 18 months before, right? It's exactly how somebody should speak, to somebody that's gone through this. Came back in there, he told me. That's when we started to question him again, and then emotion took over. Everything that I had been feeling for the past 18 months came out. Can't repeat probably what I told him in person on this podcast, but the whole sheriff's office dumped out. We probably had 6 officers come out, and I remember telling Carrie everything that I thought about him and the job that he did and how he failed our family. One of the officers intervened and tried to defuse the situation. Then there was a plain clothed officer there because, again, the grand jury was going on. They were hearing a lot of cases, so that whole lobby was filled with law enforcement officers. He intervened and told that uniformed officer that I'm going to get to say what I'm going to say, and so they backed off, and I continued to be very verbal with how I felt at that moment and the built up frustration and anger and just complete and utter disappointment that I had for his office. And Kerry ran back in his office and shut the door. And Rhonda and I went to the front window to speak to Brett Smith, demanded to speak to Smith. And true to form, Brett Smith hid, wouldn't come speak to us, and just proves what kind of man he is and what kind of leader he is. So yeah, I'd say it was very quick response. Everything that I said to the prosecutor that day, don't take back a thing at all. And I'd say it again if I had the chance to do it over. Say everything again, probably a little louder.
Wow. I mean, that's an incredible moment in this story. And I just want to commend, if I heard this correctly, I just want to commend the plainclothed officer who stepped in to say, no, let him speak his mind. And that happened?
Yes.
That's wow.
Yes.
Wow. That's impressive to me, because I'm not sure why that person did that, but that was a way to properly diffuse the situation, let you just get that all out. He saw that needed to happen, but he also saw, I'm sure, that like this was a failure to the entire community, like you've said. Have you kept in touch with that officer since that moment?
No, and I didn't know who that officer was. Wish I could shake his hand, because I needed to get that out. Rhonda needed to get that out, and Kerry Ashmore needed to hear it.
But he obviously, or he or she, that officer, obviously knew who you were. You would think, right?
I don't know. I would assume so. That story, our story had been covered a lot, and the failures of the DA's office and DPS was very well known throughout our entire community and through this county. And I would imagine this with law enforcement as well.
Did you say that Brett Smith actually defended one of the Fosters in a DUI case?
Prior to coming to work for the DA's office, Brett Smith, like most attorneys, was in private practice, and he was in criminal defense, and actually defended Corey Foster's wife in a DWI, where Corey Foster was a passenger in the truck and later pled no contest to public intoxication himself. So again, the Fosters paid Smith to defend them in a DWI case, where not only Corey Foster's wife was a party in that case, but Foster was there, and again later pled no contest to public intoxication. And then you fast forward years later, there's a similar type situation, and I've heard from multiple attorneys in this county that Brett Smith should have absolutely not been involved in this case at all. But instead, Brett Smith was the first person that we met with. And we went over how horrible that first meeting was with Brett, after Katie was killed. But Brett shouldn't have had anything to do with our case, seeing that, he defended that family in a DWI case prior to becoming an assistant district attorney here in Grayson County.
Yeah, it seems like that could be a clear conflict of interest there. For Brett Smith, where is he at now? Is he still DA?
Well, I've got great news. So, Brett Smith announced last year, about in July, that he was going to run for re-election, and we knew that he was going to run for re-election. Prior to that, I had put up signs. I had put up billboards in Sherman, Texas, which is the county seat, help wanted signs for a new district attorney, because that's what we needed. A gentleman who's been an attorney here he's been an attorney for 37 years by the name of John Kermit Hill, saw those signs, had gotten in contact with me and others that were wanting to see change here in Grayson County, wanted to promote justice for all in Grayson County, not justice for some. We had gotten involved in the county judge election back in 2022, and got the county judge unseated based upon his reckless actions of DWI and him putting the lives of his constituents in danger. And definitely wanted change in the DA's office for obvious reasons that I've already stated, right? And so John Kermit Hill got into contact with us, my gosh, 18 months before the election, we got to know the type of man that John Kermit Hill was, morally and ethically centered man, not wanting to, again, promote justice and be a part of the good old boys system that we have here in Grayson County, but wanted to see change. He heard our story, as well as other stories of other victims like the Ramirez's and the Robinsons here in Grayson County, who were absolutely failed by our current justice system. And sitting at the head of that justice system is our district attorney, Brett Smith. Guys, it was a very long campaign. The primaries were this past March, and I am happy beyond ecstatic to say that it will be a fact that in 2025, Brett Smith will no longer be the district attorney here in Grayson County. John Kermit Hill defeated our incumbent DA by less than 600 votes. It was a very close race. By less than 600 votes, defeated Brett Smith in the Republican primary. And the hurdles that John Kermit Hill's campaign had to go against, I mean, the Hill campaign was outspent 10-1. You know, you turn on the TV, there's a commercial for Brett Smith. You look on Facebook and there's, another fundraiser. But the citizens had heard enough. The voters in Grayson County heard enough. They had seen enough, and they read enough to know that the current DA that we had in office was just an abject failure. During this campaign, there were many debates where Brett Smith openly pointed to our family in the audience and called us liars. There was an assistant DA, Matt Flanagan, who was tired of how Brett Smith ran his office, came out, publicly spoke out against Brett Smith. A month or so prior to Election Day, had just had enough. Smith, he quoted Smith as calling Katie's case and our plight for justice a dead horse issue, was actively recruiting assistant DAs for endorsements when he told them that, he did want them to get involved, and then put pressure on these men and women to openly endorse him, which is just a failure as a leader, right? To put those that are under you and demand that they openly support you in public created just a very toxic work environment. And then was the phone call.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
I was anonymously given a phone recording between Brett Smith and Tarif Al-Khatib. I got into possession of this tape, and we've posted this all on social media, so it's on the Justice for Katie Palmer Facebook page, and I put a link to a Dropbox, so anybody and everybody that wants to download it can have it and share it. There was a phone call that took place between Tarif Al-Khatib, again, who was the investigating officer for the crash that killed Katie, and again, Brett Smith, who is the current DA. This phone call was very disturbing, and this took place during the campaign. In this phone call, so Tarif Al-Khatib is going through a divorce. Okay, he mentions this, and Brett Smith calls a very well-respected and very beloved female attorney here in Grayson County. I'll spell it out, a CUNT, says that he wouldn't urinate on her if she was on fire, wouldn't pull her out of a burning truck. Refers to me, my family, all of our supporters and advocates, like you two guys, mother effers.
I watch these motherfuckers come out with that one fucking case and talk about all the injustice in the DA's office. You don't think that's a fucking kick in my nuts?
I don't even know what that is, I don't guess.
The Palmer case.
Oh, the Palmer case.
All the injustice and all these victims behind me have been denied. It's all the Palmer shit. There's no... And so it's this lie,
but
man.
The people see that, man.
Man, I hope so, buddy.
No, they do.
I'm worried. I'm honest with you, Trif. I'm worried right now.
Well,
Maybe I'm just being paranoid.
I know exactly where your thinking's coming from, and it's coming from this. You're thinking, man, Judge Majors didn't get reelected. Well, guess what, though? Judge Majors freaking got arrested for a DWI again. I mean, the people that don't even have social media or follow any of that bullcrap knew that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I don't think that the Palmers had 1% to do with Bill. 1%.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, for instance, I taught at the police academy again. I give my whole story of everything. When I teach SFSTs, I did it to our department, everything. And I ask them, I always start out, who's ever heard of Justice for Katie Palmer? There was 28 in this class. Only one person had heard, and it's because they worked at the jail.
Yeah.
It's
I think
lost
you're right.
all
I mean,
its traction, man.
We've been picking juries for 3.5, 4 years, and we don't ever have a problem picking a jury. We always get people in that, and that issue always kind of comes up.
Yeah, and you know why? Because if somebody that followed that and really believed, they would say, well, I don't trust the DA's office or the police or whatever. They would say that to excuse themselves.
It was horrible. It was exactly who we thought Brett Smith was. You know, very juvenile, very narcissistic. In addition to that, it just shows you the close relationship that Al-Khatib and Smith have. Smith offers to give Al-Khatib $5,000 out of his own pocket to help cover any expenses that he was incurring through this divorce. But again, it just shows that Smith will do anything to back Tarif, who we now come to find Smith and Al-Khatib are related through marriage. So there's just another piece of that triangle, right? Just another thread in that web. It's just, guys, it's mind blowing. You know, the more that we dig into this, the more that we uncover, the more that we find out, again, you know, how Brett Smith wasn't doing his job, and we can just peel back the layers and just find motive after motive of why he, I don't even want to say failed to get justice for Katie Palmer, but why he refused justice for Katie Palmer.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if you say failed, that means that there was like an attempt to try, you know, and there wasn't even that attempt here. So there's no like fail or not fail. There's just you just didn't, you just prevented it, which is infuriating. And I'm curious, as you're uncovering all of these like layers and going back to when you actually were injured, you had the physical injuries that you had to recover from. You have obviously the unthinkable emotional injuries that you have to recover from. And then on top of that, just like uncovering all of this and getting that energy and that drive to bring justice to Katie, but to bring justice to the community. And you mentioned 2 other families that were wronged. Like, where are you finding the energy to do this during your recovery process?
Love. Katie was amazing. And I know that if the roles were reversed, she would do everything that I'm doing now. So when you have that kind of love for somebody and you've connected with somebody, how can I stop? How could you stop, Tim? How could you stop Lance? Couldn't. Especially when there was such an injustice done, and it's so glaring to everybody that gets all of the facts. Okay. And again, we've said this very early on. There is nothing that we can do to bring Katie back. Okay. Nothing. But you know, we can continue to fight. We can continue to try to cause positive change, and we can make sure that it doesn't happen to another family. We can make sure that Tarif's inability to do his job correctly back in April of 2020 is put out there and is covered and is talked about and is shared and is read and is seen and is heard. Make sure that if there's an officer that pulls up on scene and there's a family friend that has just killed somebody or has committed a crime, that they think twice. That Brett Smith's, not wanting to get justice for Katie. Maybe there's a prosecutor that hears this podcast or hears the previous podcast that we've done with you guys that thinks twice before mailing it in. That's the positive change. And again, unseating Brett Smith as DA, that's massive. So, Brett will not do that to another family here in Grayson County, and hopefully not here in the state of Texas.
And how are your kids doing? How's the family doing? Because you told us a little bit the last time that we spoke.
Kids are growing like weeds. My daughter is graduating high school here in a couple weeks, which as a parent is amazing and scary at the same time, right? Because you have a kid that is turning into an adult, and she'll soon be off to college. Hadn't decided on which college yet, but she will be off to college, and she's amazing. My son is amazing too. He started high school this past year. Is going to get out of his first year of high school, and he's just about as tall as me now. And they're my son's growing into a young adult, and he'll be a man. And daughter is going to be on her own, and again, which is a scary thought as a parent, but she's going to do amazing things, and I'm proud of them both. Kids, you never give them credit on how strong that they are, but kids are resilient, and they were amazing, and I'm very lucky. Very, very, very blessed.
Yeah, and I think that the same goes for them. Having you as a parent to navigate them through this, like you don't want any child to experience this. So, and there's no like playbook on how to do it. So I think I think you should allow yourself a little credit right there as well.
I appreciate that, but I've leaned on them as much as they've leaned on me. So we've definitely gotten through this. Not by just one person, but we've gotten through this together. We'll never get over it, but so far we're still fighting through it, and it took everybody. So.
And one more thing, real quick, it's like you're leading me into my questions, which I totally appreciate. You said we'll get through it together. I read an article that mentioned the Hagerman Wildlife Refuge, and they did something like kind of special for Katie. What was that?
It just goes to show how great of a person and how much of an impact Katie made here in Denison, here in Grayson County. Hagerman. So Hagerman's a wildlife refuge that is pretty close to our house. It's outside of the city limits here in Grayson County, and Katie studied biology in college, and she loved ornithology, loved birds. I mean, love birds. And I told this story at the dedication that they did over at Hagerman. I don't know how many times we would go run errands, and we would need to go into town. The next thing I know, we're driving out towards Hagerman, and which is completely out of the way for when we lived inside the city limits. We'd end up at Hagerman, pulled over to the side of the road inside of the wildlife refuge, and Katie would pull out some binoculars that she'd have in her car, which every normal person carries binoculars in their car, right? And she would sit there and look for birds and call out birds, and she'd see one, and it was like she was calling these birds out like it's the first time that she saw something take flight. She just loved it. She was amazed by them, loved birds. We talked about the killdeer. Her favorite bird was a killdeer, which is a bird that nests on the ground, and she loved these birds. And those were the birds that she wanted to go see when we went for a walk back in April of 2020. These are birds that nest on the ground, and so if a predator comes by, one of the parents, in order to protect their offspring, will fake an injury and be loud and almost sacrifice himself to save the babies, to save the offspring. And she thought that was so cool that, a parent would, a animal would do that in order to protect their young, right? Going back to Hagerman, she used to teach a class there. She started a youth program that meant once or twice a month they would have activities. She was in charge of it. We'd have a room full of kids. They would either go on a nature walk. They would do activities inside. One was they would dissect owl pellets, right? So, these kids would get in there and they would dissect it and they would lay out, everything that the owl had ate. Katie was way into it. Me, not so much. So she would have these activities going and loved it. She got more out of it than the kids did, right? In order to be a good teacher, you have to have that, willingness and want to learn. And she was always learning. And she built that program up. And Hagerman, a year or two ago, had an outdoor educational pavilion that they erected, and they dedicated that to Katie and put a monument out by it. Fitting. Very, very, very fitting for her to be remembered that way. There's also the closet that they have for kids at Scott Middle School, Katie's closet. She used to bring clothes in for, kids, jackets. And when she passed away, the school had dedicated one room and created a boutique type setting. So kids could go in there and pick out their clothes. And that's been going on for a couple years. And, again, it was amazing that they would think of her and do that and, keep her legacy going through helping others and especially kids that she cared for and loved. And then we've talked about the Katie Palmer project, putting lights on houses for those that have suffered a loss or endured a hardship over the past year. And that's done by, all firefighters. And that was created by Dustin Bortsfield, who's been a friend of mine since high school and wanted to spread Katie's light. So amazing, and I think that's truly the mark of somebody that made a difference is how you're remembered. And those are three great things that she's going to be remembered for, and carries on her legacy. And just like Dustin said, keeps shining her light bright.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. What is next for you and your fight for justice?
Well, next we've still got an election in November. John Kerman Hill will be running against. There's a Democrat that's going to be running for DA as well. Very, very confident in Kermit and this election as the Republican nominee for DA. So we're going to hyper focus on that. Tarif Al-Khatib is still a DPS officer here in Grayson County. I've said this numerous times. Tarif Al-Khatib doesn't deserve to wear a badge. His failures on April 21st, 2020 have still gone unpunished by DPS. They've circled their wagons around him and they've insulated him, and doesn't need to happen to another family. I don't believe that he deserves to be an officer, and I believe that DPS should hold him accountable. We'll continue to fight for that, and in and amongst all this, Corey Foster's never been held accountable. We've still got a civil case against him, and if that's the only justice that we get is taking him to civil court and actually seeing him in a courtroom. I wish it was a criminal courtroom, but a civil courtroom, if that's the direction that we have to go, that's fine. To have him be held accountable in public and judged by a jury, again, civilly, not criminally. If that's justice that we're afforded, then we'll take it all the way.
you've kind of presented like a new definition of justice in my perspective, because a lot of people will have this definition of justice where, you know, you're checking off the list of people that need to be held accountable. And that's definitely part of it. But I didn't realize like the other part of it is all of those good things that you were talking about. Do you see that as well? Like the justice is having the pavilion dedicated and having the lights in the community. Is that all part of like the justice mission?
I think that to me would be more of the healing part.
Okay, yeah.
The remembrance and the doing good works in her name. It's a shame that we have to wait until somebody passes away in order to celebrate them, right? Because there's great people that walk amongst us every single day that you really don't sit back and you really don't make sure that they that they are aware of how much of an impact that they've made, right? Doing good works in her name. Like I said before, it's part of the healing process. But I could see also where it's justice as well. Maybe not justice for Katie, but I guess holistically to help out others, just like what you said, whether it be clothes, whether it be promoting the outdoor education system over at Hagerman, or bringing a smile to someone's face, right? By putting Christmas lights on their house and just letting them know that somebody's thinking about them. That's positive change. That's what we've been fighting for. Again, it might not be specific to Katie's case, but just letting others know that you're there for them. Sure. I think it all helps. Absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to say here today, John?
No, I just want to make sure you guys know how much I appreciate both of y'all. I've said this on a couple of other podcasts. You guys are not podcasters. You guys are advocates. And it took everybody doing everything over the past 4 years to make a difference here in Grayson County, and you guys are a part of that. Without you guys telling our story and reaching your listeners, letting me use your platform, which I'm very appreciative of, to talk about our fight for Katie and everything we've gone through since we last spoke in November of 2021. Everything made a difference. Everything for the past 4 years led up to Brett Smith not being reelected by less than 600 votes. It was very close, but we couldn't have done it without everybody. And because of that, and because of advocates like you both, we now have change in Grayson County, and we know that Smith will never treat another family like he did our family, like he did the Ramirez family, and like he did the Robinson family. So I want to tell you guys, thank you very much. You guys made a difference, and I appreciate you guys.
Same. I mean, anytime you want to use this platform, it's yours. And while the conversation is always an emotional one, it's a welcome conversation, because what you bring to the table and to the conversation, and the voice and your mission, people hear that. So there are other families out there that need to hear what you're saying, so they can find that strength.
And it's hard. It really is hard. There were many times over the past 4 years that we felt like we were just screaming out into the wind, beating our head against the wall. But again, it took everybody, and we're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep demanding accountability with Foster and now with Al Khatib, and make sure that we continue to make a difference. And thank you, guys.